Okay, good evening again. Before we start, I have a question. I'm actually heading to the airport immediately after the lecture, and next Tuesday I'll be in Israel. Does it make any sense for us to try to get together in a classroom? But I guess it has to be at 7 p.m. Or everybody prefers to stay home and continue to do this by Zoom? I would
I
love
think it
to.
would be great if we could meet, yeah.
Okay, so Leon, can you check with, I don't know, in the office, I don't know with whom, either way, is there a way for us to meet next Tuesday? I'm flexible, so, we can change the hour as well, but I don't know. I mean, we have some people outside of Israel who are joining the class, so we have to figure this out, but it would be very helpful if you can maybe send me email or text or whatever, just to tell me what you think about this. I would love to meet you in person. So I'm all in favor of us meeting. This is a very short.
Maybe it can be also in Zoom while you're in the class.
Yeah. If we do this, we'll do it hybrid for sure.
Thank you.
That's not a question. We'll accommodate everybody, but at least some of us could, I would love to meet you in person and be in the same class. So that's for next week. This is a very short trip. I'll be coming back to LA at the end of next week. And then I'll be here for like 2 weeks. And then I'm coming back to Israel on June 16th. So I think there are 2 more meetings that we could do in person as well, just at the end of the semester. So I'm totally flexible and happy to do this. If you can please go to the office and talk to them and maybe to Yossi and figure out how we do this. If we do this, it has to be hybrid. Okay, so that's the first thing on the agenda. And the next thing is, of course, the usual Mentimeter question. I hope you don't have this very cheerful response just because, that's what I want to hear. Last time we had some tired and exhausted, but tense. Is there anything I can do to help? I don't think you're tense because of my course. Okay. Something in the chat. Okay, room 301 is hybrid. All right, the question is if you can schedule it at the same time, different time, and how that is all going to work. Leon will come back to us with details, but I definitely in favor of us meeting. Before we start, any questions, requests, complaints?
Anglit.
Sorry? Can you repeat? Was a comment about English? I thought I was speaking English. Okay. So if no more comments or administration issues, we'll start. Today we have 3 speakers, Zachariah, Omer, and Dan. And without any further ado, I will allow Zachariah to share his screen.
I think I also need to present today, no?
Who?
David.
So it's not on the Google Sheet. David, who is presenting? I cannot hear you.
I filled the Excel file.
Excel or the Google Sheet, the online?
I think it was the Excel, the Google Sheet. I didn't saw it.
Well, it's not there, but so David, what is the last name?
Yasula Levy.
Okay, so all right. All right, so Zakaria, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, hi, I'm Zakaria. I'm going to talk about electronic cigarettes and the connection between them and a heart attack. And this is the title of the article that I chose to tell the story about. That doesn't move. Okay, so what's vaping? For those who don't know, it's when it's like a tool that used for as an alternative to regular cigarette. It appears in 2003. It was published between the adults in 2007. And they start to investigate and research its benefits in 2004, 2005. One of the authors of the article is Professor Stan Arnold Glantz, that he was one of the smoker fighters, as they describe him. Well, I quote from him. He once said that he wanted to destroy the tobacco industry that kills 5 million people around the world in every year. And one of the funny things that I found that his friends give him a T-shirt that wrote. They write on it, here comes the trouble for the industry, tobacco industry. In the article, they depends on odds ratio and confidence in interval to analyze the data that they collect from the path population and assessment. Second, population assessment of tobacco and health. And here we go. The birth of the idea was in 2018. And Glantz published his article in the Journal of the American Heart. And he said it provided more evidence that e-cigarettes cause heart attacks. Actually, his first evidence was published in his first article 8 months earlier in another journal. He titled it Association Between Electronic Cigarettes Use and Myocardial Infarction. So the study depends, as I said, on data that collected from the population assessment of tobacco health. And they collect the data from 32,320 participants in 2 waves. In wave 1 and in wave 2, there was just 28,362 adults from that they are vape users and smokers. Between them was 26,447 adults that they was complete the wave 1 interview. The 2 waves were collected. The data were collected in 2 years between 2013 and 15. And in the data that they collect, they depends on outcome variables in wave 1. The participants were asked. They asked them if they has a doctor or nurse or other health professional ever told him that he had a myocardial infarction or heart attack before, and whose answered yes, they considered it as having a myocardial infarction. In wave 2, they changed the question to, in the past 12 months, has a doctor or nurse or other health professional told you that you had a heart attack? And if the answer is yes, they was considered as having a myocardial infarction. And the difference was that will make all the change in the analysis that it was in the past 12 months. And they have two categories in the sample. They separate each category to separate into how they use the electronic cigarette or how they regulate to smoke. There was everyday users or Sunday users or former users or never users for the electronic cigarettes, and the same for the smokers. It was weird to see in the presenting of the article that they started their article with a conclusion that tells clearly that there's an effect of the electronic cigarettes that is similar to conventional cigarettes to heart attack, and that it's increased actually the risk to have a heart attack in the future. The result shows association between e-cigarettes use and having had a myocardial infarction. Here we can see the results. I'm not going to talk about the results. It have a lot of numbers, and but the result and the conclusion is that there is an association between e-cigarettes and heart attack. The sample number was 32,320, and they used an expression like as expected in the result paragraphs in the article. It shows that they expect the result actually before they start the data collection. And in the final conclusion, they just in the final sentence of the article, they request from the health government and other they ask for to promote and prescribe the e-cigarettes as a less to not promote and prescribe the e-cigarettes as a less risky alternative to compostable cigarettes, and should not be recommended for smoking cessation among people with or at risk of myocardial infarction. So the work was widely influential with anti-vaping advocates and government health authorities. And they make the tobacco industry, they actually bother them with their research, and they make them make their studies and start to in the data that they provide. Our second main person in the story is Professor Brad Rudo, who tried to retract the study after about 1 month of its published. He found that there is a majority of the 38 patients in the study who had heart attack, and they had them before they start vaping, actually. And he called Glant's findings as false and invalid. In November 2018, the journal asked Professor Glant to verify their findings, especially the table that they used to provide and support their expecting results from 2007. And the research said that they were no longer able to access the data. And I found that before the asking of the journal to support the data in the table 6, the authors actually make an correction to the data that they analyzed in the table 7, and they published it in November 2018. After Rudo peer review, 16 of the researchers wrote to the journal editor asking for retraction. One of the researchers suggested to remove the data from the people who had heart problem before they start vaping. But no one of the authors did something or anything to correct the analysis. So the editor sent them to the authors a deadline to reanalyze the data that they provide, but they didn't because they were unable to access the PATH database. So the editors considered that the study conclusion is unreliable. And 2020, they retract the article. Glantz tried to say that in an interview that the problem was in the statistical practices. Like it's not about the data that they provide. But Rudo didn't think so, and he wrote here that it's about scientific judgment and conduct. And yet, that wasn't enough for Rudo. After 5 months, no, that was in February, this is in November, about nine months, he published a reanalysis of the e-cigarettes use and heart attack. He reached the data and he make a reanalysis to the same data. And he found that there is that association of current vaping and heart attack was disappeared after the correction, and the results was supporting the decision of the editors to retract the article. And he asked a question in the conclusion of his reanalysis, that what analysis that authors may have undertaken that were not reported and why they didn't conduct the analysis reported here or requested during peer review of the original article. What Rudo did to the data, he correct the number of the participants and they took out the people who had a heart attack before they started vaping. In November 2080, before the retracted glance tried to support the article with new data. He published another paper that titled Adding Data from 2015 Strengthens the Association Between E-cigarettes use and myocardial infarction. But that was not enough to support his opinion because he didn't support the data from 2007. And after the retraction, he said that the editors also gave Dr. Bahata and him an option to retract the paper by themselves, but they don't want because they think it's a fact that there's an association between electronic cigarettes and heart attack, and they still stand behind their paper. And he commented in the end of the interview that it's important to keep in mind that this discussion is about supplementary analysis, not the main analysis in the paper. We are still hoping to regain access to path so that we can do the additional analysis and put this issue behind us. And actually, after the reanalysis of Professor Rudo, I didn't find any comment for Professor Glantz. What we are looking at is something that we don't know anything actually about it. According to Harvard Health Publishing this year, they said that we still don't have enough information or researches about the vaping, and we can't relate it to any health problem. And thank I want to add something.
Go ahead.
What I found in this story that it depends on the opinion of the authors. They took their opinion and they go ahead with the result that they have in mind, not in
trying to force the data to fit their own opinion, basically. Okay, so thank you very much, Zakaria. Two things that come immediately to my mind. One is way too often people misuse statistics. You take some statistical package, you shove, garbage in, you get garbage out. One needs to be very, very careful when you exercise statistics, and most people are not trained well enough in statistics to use these tools properly and correctly. The other thing is data is not available. So we talked a lot about open science. They had a database, they used some data from there, and they probably use it incorrectly. And then when they wanted to go back and reanalyze the data, that data was not available anymore. So this is just showing how important it is to deposit the data publicly, and anyone at any point in time, many years going forward, will have the chance to go back into the data and reanalyze it and maybe come with different conclusions. Once the data disappears, you cannot do much. So there is no real, I say, scientific misconduct, intention to deceit or whatever, but there is definitely bad science here. And one should never force their opinion on results, and should be open-minded and be very careful when using statistics to draw conclusions. Other comments? The paper is open for discussion. Now I will give you my personal idea. I don't smoke, I never smoked, and I don't think vaping is good either. Anybody is vaping?
Yes, me.
And you're fine, no health issues.
I'm fine.
Yeah,
Thanks to God.
okay. Yeah, I think the jury's out. I don't think we know enough. And I don't think there is enough statistics, and there is no good science as of yet, really looking into this carefully.
I must say that the damage from cigarette smoking or maybe vaping takes some time. So
Yeah,
maybe
it might take tens of years before we have conclusions. I agree. But obviously cigarettes have tar, and that's obvious. So you say that part, but still I think consuming nicotine long term for a long time doesn't sound right to me, but I'm biased. More comments? If no, thanks again, Korea. That's great. And now Omer. So Omer, you can share your screen.
I can see it's shared, right?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Omer. I'm a PhD student at Bar-Ilan University, and I'm a resident at the urology department at Chaim Shiba Medical Center. And the paper I'm gonna present is out of my field completely. And it's probably the most ancient paper presented in this workshop. This paper was written by this guy, Edward Drinker Cope. Cope is an American paleontologist from the 19th century. For those of you just like myself that do not know what paleontology means, paleontology is the study of history of life on Earth as based on fossils, bones. Well, the second half of the 19th century was a great time for paleontologists. West America was full of completely unexplored lands with undiscovered fossils. And the word dinosaur is actually quite new. It was not in regular use back then. And this world of these extinct reptiles was heaven for young scientists. So this is where we come in, and this is the paper that I will present. This is actually a preprint of a discovery of Edward Cope, which was also presented in a meeting of the Academy of Natural Science in Philadelphia back then in 1868. His finding that he presents here is on a dinosaur species that he named Elasmosaurus. It was a descriptive article on the anatomy of, I'm so sorry, just a second. Forgot to mute my phone. The anatomy of this creature that Cope found, based on the fossils that Cope found. And the article included detailed figures of the skeletal anatomy of this creature. Another original figure from the paper. You can see here that Cope initially characterized this Elasmosaurus by this enormous length of its tail and relatively shorter cervical region. He also specified a total of 72 caudal, meaning tailed vertebrae that belongs to the tail, to his self-published preprint release just a few months later from this meeting on 1869. And he further suggested that the vertebral count was 121. I don't know how did he base it, because he didn't report any of his methodological way of thinking. Anyway, nearly 12 months later, after the first meeting, another paleontologist in the same yearly meeting in 1870 in Philadelphia, Joseph Leidy, another great researcher, pointed out that Cope had described the skeleton in a reversed position compared to the true one. And he actually published a report discussing Cope's mistake. So you can see here the mistake and the real creature. He noted, Leidy noted that there were 72 vertebrae like Cope claimed, but the ending was in the different side. Actually, the neck was long and the tail is quite short. This is a simple mistake, and this mistake comes along with us to these days and put some confusion between scientists in the field still till today. And when focusing on that paper only, one might raise the question whether it's just an honest mistake while exploring an unknown field with limited understanding of this field, or maybe rushing for documented discovery, like he did with this preprint before he validated his data, is the reason for this mistake. So this story is way more than just this paper, and actually there is much more to tell about this. And details I will present here might enlighten many bad aspects of science and the specific story of Edward Rinker Cope. So Edward Cope did not work alone in this field, and Othniel Charles Marsh, as others, Marsh was introduced to this world as well and performing his work from another university, Yale University. Cope and Marsh both were educated men. They came from wealthy families. They first met in Berlin, 1863, and in a congress. And in the beginning, like many enemies, in the beginning of their way, they had quite a friendly and ambient relationship. And both of them sent out many excavations for finding fossils. A sense of competition between scientists is something that we see, but I think that these two men went far beyond typical professional rivalry. Their ambition to go all the way, just to be the first, just to be the best, even in the cost of destroying other findings, is for our luck well documented and called the Bone War. So here are some aspects of this bone war between these two enemies. The Elasmosaurus mistake is not the only mistake Cope made, and of course not the only mistake Marsh noted. Marsh, for example, was sent a headless skeleton of long-necked dinosaur around 1877 and called it Apatosaurus. But when he tried to describe the creature, he reconstructed it with totally wrong skull. Today we know it. And a couple of years later, another whole fossil that was sent to him, this time with a skull, just for the same animal, he named it Brontosaurus. By the way, this confusion as well, this is the Brontosaurus, this time with the correct skull. This confusion lasts till today. Eventually, both scientists published so many articles with so little science and so many mistakes and bad methodology. Cope himself, by the way, published over 1,400 papers. So many journals just refused to publish them. So what could they do? They just bought the journals. Cope owned the American Naturalist, and Marsh had available rapid publication in the National Journal of Science that was at Yale University. Aside that, both of them had the habit of rushing a telegram statement before validating data. Maybe it's a version, the first version for electronic publication. I don't know. Anyway, they both made a lot of mistakes. For example, giving a new name for an already discovered animal, or counting inconclusive fragments of bone as a whole new animal. The telegraph was new in the 19th century, and all Cope had to do was to go to the telegraph office, put out a few messages in his awful handwriting, and have them sent to the Academy or to the American Philosophy Society in Philadelphia. They beautifully published the descriptions in the next morning or next month in their respectful scientific publications. Cope's handwriting is described as a very bad handwriting, and the combination between the handwriting and the American Morse code back then created foolish mistakes and made paleontologists sometimes disoriented for many years after that. At the beginning of his professional way, Cope joined Geological Survey that funded him generously, but the support was limited eventually, and there is a tale about Cope arriving to a location expecting equipment and men and horses that were not there, and eventually he had to pay for his own expeditions. Marsh, on the other hand, used his wealthy uncle's fortune to support his efforts, and sometimes using them wrongly, spying on Cope's works, stealing his works, and bribing them, his workers, and bribing them to send him more bones. There is another tale about Marsh striking a deal with one of the Indian chiefs. Western America was still settled with Native Americans that controlled the areas and were kind of dangerous to the local expedition, to those expeditions for finding fossils. So the story was about Marsh creating a deal with an Indian chief, a respectful Indian chief in Dakota. He paid him to send all the fossils they found to Marsh, and he created a political lobby on behalf of this Indian tribe. And the Indian chief is stated to call Marsh the best white man I ever saw. So using money for science here in a borderline way is also part of this war. Next, the new scientists came into this bad relationship between those two. Arthur Lake. Lake worked in Colorado and offered both scientists collaboration. Marsh wasn't interested, but when he heard that his enemy was also contacted, he responded quickly, sent an agent, and set a deal with Lakes in order to get everything first and just for him. By the way, he got a large tooth from him that later was claimed to be the first T-Rex tooth ever found. Cope had a very organized documentation for every scientific mistake made by Marsh. By the way, he was not that organized, consider his own work in the field, but he did document Marsh's mistake. Marsh's, on the other hand, cited Cope's work in almost all of his publications, many publications, as I said, and not in a good way, of course. I'll finish with the Como Bluff. The Como Bluff was announced back then to be one of the richest area in fossils. Both Marsh and Cope sent their excavations deemed. The crew were involved in serious battles, throwing rocks at each other, sometimes gunfires, hiding findings, and even destroying and sabotaging fossils just for the other crew not to find it, which is a new level of scientific competition. By the way, when Cope passed away, miserable and penniless, he claimed one last challenge against his rival, asking him to measure his brain and prove that his is bigger than Marsh's. Back then, people believed that brain size and intelligence are correlated, another wrong claim, of course. But Marsh never accepted this challenge. So Edward Smith have written about these two guys, that scientists are only mortals after all. Of course, I agree, but I think that this story about the bone war creates a new grotesque and exaggerated competition and bad habits and bad science that I guess in part of it is good for healthy motives and motivations, but mostly made a lot of mistakes and destructions to scientific data that some of it cannot be restored, like the bones they have destroyed and many others.
Hey, thank you very much, Omer. That's terrific. And yes, competition is allowed and even in many ways helpful in terms of pushing science forward. But that has to be done, you know, with good taste and there is a thin line to cross. And obviously, till this day, this bone war has impact on paleontologists. Thank you very much. The paper, maybe before we start discussion, just mention, if anyone gets to Utah, go to the Dinosaur National Monument. It's absolutely incredible. That's not far from the map where you showed where they found all the fossils. That was a lake, so it's clay soil, and the clay was drying up. So all the animals used to come to the lake to drink, and eventually they all were buried in the mud. And later on, when the Rockies were folded into mountains, this bottom of the lake went up to 60 or 70 degrees. And you have this, I don't know, 50 to 100 meters wall in front of you, full of dinosaurs. It's so incredible. I very highly recommend. Okay, this discussion now, this paper is open for discussion. Anybody wants to say anything? Competition. Have you seen competition in your own fields?
I thought it was like pretty amazing. Like Sweden, it's not something new because many people put, like in Brazil, in my master, I did a class that it's philosophy and science. And after we see then have like money involved and things like this, like science become professional way. Of course, then we'll have like more misconduct, but you see like things like very old like this, yeah, also like make you think about it. You can see then it's like two people then like have money and was like good education, like this.
Money makes a difference, and people who have more money can do more than people who have less money, and especially if they abuse money. So I think most of you are physicists. In physics, there is competition, but I mean, in many, many ways, you can think about physics as the mother of all sciences. And in many ways, I think it's cleaner. in biology, for example, it's not that much anymore, but when I started, I shifted basically from solid state physics to biophysics. And at that time, you would put your whole scientific career, 30, 40 years on one protein. Let it be the ribosome or the polymerase or whatever, and you would study it forever, and you put so much effort in it, and there were a few other groups doing the same. So the competition was very fierce, and people were very, very careful not to disclose anything. So everything was hidden, and you wouldn't, you would make sure that nobody hears about your findings until you have a peer-reviewed paper, and because people were afraid to be scooped. Basically, the other group is publishing first. And that, I remember as a young scientist, pretty amazing events in terms of competition in biology. I don't think it's as common in physics, and I don't think it's as common today as it used to be. Anybody wants to say something about this?
I see it as a common event. Israel is a small place, so when there is a researcher that deals with the subject, you know about your other colleagues, and so I do see it. The beautiful aspect of this story is how big it can get,
right,
using explosive and all the efforts available. So
and sending an Indian tribe to sabotage the other two.
Right. This is one step ahead or several steps ahead, but I do see it in a more polite and respectful way.
Okay, great. If no comments, let's move on. We have two more talks. Dan Shafir is the next. Thank you, Omer.
Okay, can you see my screen?
We don't hear you well.
If I'm closer to the microphone now?
I think, that's
better? Yeah. Okay, I'll try to speak more loudly too. Okay, so my story is less about the paper, but what happened regarding this paper. So this is called Slimming to the Death, Herbalife-Associated Fatal Acute Liver Failure. So in August 2018, a group of researchers in India published a report that a 24-year-old woman had taken a variety of supplements by Herbalife, and eventually she died. What happened was she had liver failure, and basically this paper was immediately attacked. So let me explain what happened here. So Herbalife is a company, if we search on Google, it's a worldwide company that produces supplements. It could be dietary pills or protein shakes for those who work out. And as we can see, they have a very large revenue. They produce billions of dollars every year. And if you look also at their website, we can see that what they publicize on their website, they produce nutritional supplements, care products, and they advertise themselves as a healthy product that people should take and should be trusted. They also give out these programs that also cost money, that you can actually improve your life, improve your dietary habits, your health, more sports, and such as that. So there are a lot of things around this company. It's very large, but a lot of stories came up about various controversies. So all of the dietary aids and all of these products are non-prescription. And there are a lot of reports of people that died from using their products for various times. Actually, this is a bit, I don't know how to call it, but it's a bit funny because I read one of the cases, and a woman that she said she took 23 different supplements from this company for a few months, and she immediately started to feel very unwell, fatigued. She couldn't hold her food down. She was nauseous all the time. So she stopped taking them, got healthier, and after she got healthier, she decided to again take all of these supplements, and immediately her health became even worse from the first time she took these supplements. She had blood in her urine, and she went to the hospital, and the doctors in the hospital already knew about these cases of Herbalife that their product can cause liver damage, and she now sues the company. So we can see here a lot of works about this, and cases, and also papers. For example, we can see here, herbal does not mean innocuous, 10 cases of severe hepatotoxicity associated with dietary supplements. Also liver failure following ingestion of Herbalife supplements. So the paper I'm talking about was published by a group in India led by Philips. So Philips is a gastroenterology, and recently, in recent years, a large portion of the market in India started to actually be controlled by this Herbalife. And Philips, he already knew that these products have a controversy to them. So he decided to actually examine some products and see what's going on, because he is concerned that they are actually taking over the whole market in India right now. So he revealed that their prescriptions have a presence of heavy metals, bacteria, undisclosed toxic compounds, including traces of psychotropic recreational agents as well. Immediately after he published this paper, I will explain the chain of events as he presented on Twitter. So last March, I published this article. A side note, in Twitter, there's a limit on how many words and letters you can fit in. So you shortened a few of the words here to make it fit. So it's a bit weird. So he published this article about a patient who died after consuming Herbalife products. Immediately afterwards, employees at Herbalife contacted him, demanding he provide them evidence for the assertions in the paper. I looked at his paper, and it is very well written, and he provides evidence about everything, and it's very meticulous, and he presents proof for everything. So it's a bit funny that they're asking this from him. And he said all of his data is available in the paper. Thereafter, the Herbalife contacted the publisher, Elsevier, and the publisher forwarded him an email from Professor Stephen Newmaster of University of Guelph. And this professor is also funded by Herbalife, and he asked him a lot of questions and proof about his findings. So because the publisher asked Philips to actually answer this, he had to write answers about all of the questions, and he provided a very thorough explanation, providing 24 pages long reply. And by the way, all of this story is available on a site called Retraction Notice that I found, and it's actually a site that follows cases such as this about retracted papers to make actually the process more transparent. So it's very nice, and they have a lot of interesting stories for anyone who is interested to look it up. Okay, so they sent the reply, 24 pages long. Elsevier then received a second letter from a group linked to Planetox. Planetox is a Brazilian consulting firm with ties to Herbalife. They are also critical of the case report. From a professor, the letter came from Planetox, which was from a guy, Dr. Zambron, who also tried to ask and find weaknesses in his manuscript. And he also had to reply to them because the journal asked him to. And Phillips answered. His answer is also available on the site. And the answer shows that he took an example from one of these supplements and examined the content. So actually on the label, they don't really say what are the ingredients. They say something general like natural herbs or green tea. And actually after he made an inspection, he saw heavy metals, toxic compounds, traces of psychotropic drugs, highly pathogenic bacteria. And this is what he links for the liver failure that the 24-year-old woman actually suffered from. Immediately after the reply, Planetox actually decided to withdraw their submission from the site. So this is a screenshot of what now is on the site. This is withdrawn, title versus content, a necessary critical review of articles leading to the death, Herbalife associated fatal acute liver failure. Then came another letter from a local law firm, again demanding that Phillips's group turn over evidence to support her paper, and demand they repeat a month later. So we are actually seeing here that this Herbalife, because they have a lot of money and they are a very large company, they are actually harassing the journal and also Phillips on many, many occasions through different channels, legal, scientific, through doctors that they actually give funds to. And this is non-stopping. So Phillips hired a law firm, answered back, but what he didn't know that actually while he was talking with concerning these legal issues and also answering the scientific reports and the letters, Herbalife went behind his back and actually pressured the journal to take down the paper, and without him knowing of this. And actually the site stated that the site where he published the paper stated that his paper was retracted due to scientific methodology. The analysis and interpretation of data underlying the article were insufficient for the conclusion drawn, and with its removal, the article can no longer be relied upon. Phillips issued a lawsuit of his own after this, and he said that the retraction was highly defamatory and against the principles of professional ethics and natural justice, and demands that either the paper be restored within a week or they pay him $1.35 million in compensation. Elsevier responded with a letter, which Phillips calls half-baked, stating that it was reviewing the claims. And neither the journal nor the committee that was in charge of inspecting the paper replied. However, he said that immediately after this, the notice on the PubMed listing for the paper was changed back to say that the paper was taken off due to legal reasons. Please contact the publisher. So basically this story is still ongoing, and it's very interesting what's going on here. And this raises a lot of questions. So I think personally that the journal should have actually try to somehow safeguard the ethics and obligation to science, but they failed to do so. So pressure from a very big company actually prevailed here. This is very sad. And also, Philip's story is only one of the stories that we heard. There are actually many other stories which are available online, but it's interesting to think about all the stories and things that happened that we never heard about, that maybe papers and research is being shut down, and somehow Herbalife is silencing all of this. There are also other stories that Herbalife is like a pyramid scheme, which they also provide courses, and this is also very suspicious. Also, another point is non-prescription diet aids, and so people should be much more careful about what type of prescriptions or how do you call them, protein shakes or anything that they take. This can be actually harmful for them, and they shouldn't believe that non-prescription means it's safe, or if it's herbal, like that, like the company says, if it's herbal, it's natural and supposed to be healthy for you. This is not true. So this is also industrial lobbying. A lot of money can prevent regulation. This is also frightening. And this is also the paper that Philip's wrote is very accurate. So it's surprising that they took it off. But I think that he actually matched the title. The title that he actually gave to the paper was too aggressive against Herbalife, and this is actually why it caught their attention and took it off, because there are also other papers, but they don't say in the title that Herbalife is bad. They just say that they saw a link between their products and some problems. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was terrific, Dan. So few comments for myself that immediately brings into mind the case of tobacco in the US. Before that, just if you heard about the big supermarket chain called Costco. This is kind of where everybody goes to buy great stuff cheaply. They have tens of meters of aisles with supplements. The problem with food supplements is that there is no FDA regulation whatsoever. Anybody in this industry can do whatever they want. And this is why it's so dangerous. And there is no control over the manufacturing process, contamination. So obviously it's very, very dangerous. The tobacco industry in the US knew that tobacco kills people. They had scientific results, which they hid. They paid scientists to come up with, different science that supports smoking. They hid from the Congress the findings. They lied to Congress, and eventually they were fined with billions of dollars. It took over 50 years. So you see the same story again here. This is a hundreds of millions of billions of dollars industry around the world. They are very, very powerful, and it's very difficult to fight them. A question to Dan. Do you know if that paper was also published in bioarchive or some kind of archive depository?
So no, I didn't find it anywhere online, only on...
Okay, so I guess the journal editors were fearful of the legal, obviously the company can pay the best lawyers and can continue to sue for many, many years. The journal doesn't have those type of resources, so cannot build good enough defense. So the easiest solution for the journal is to restore the paper. doing so without actually talking to the authors and getting their approval for whatever ground, that sounds really very unethical. Money speaks, and unfortunately, this is how things work in our world. Very upsetting story. I wasn't aware of this story. It's really upsetting. Okay, this is open for now. Any thoughts?
It was very good. That's all.
Now, the fact that the journal can withdraw your paper without your consent for whatever reason. Wow.
Shocking.
Yeah.
I actually tried to find what's happening right now with this story, but I haven't found any updates.
I think that the company cannot remove a paper from a depository. That's my guess. I'm not sure. So at least if you can put it in the depository, people can still access it. And the damage to the company will still, you know, be there. I hope that they will have to face Congress at some point, the same way that tobacco companies did.
So I believe this site retraction notice was actually set up for this purpose, to actually show what's going on, and they have all of this material available.
Yeah, and I think it's also very interesting to see, you know, the author is suing the journal.
Yes.
And rightfully so. So I think, I mean, we don't know the end of the story, right? Still ongoing. I think he has grounds to do so.
Yes, actually, he asked for a very small amount, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, this is India money scale, so. You know, $1.3 million in India, I guess, is a lot, so. Any other comments? Now, if that was a lawsuit in the US for damages, it would be hundreds of millions of dollars. And it would be a class action and whatever. Okay, thank you, Dan. And we'll go to the last presentation today by David. So Dan, you can unshare your screen. Please send me your presentation. And David. David, are you there? We cannot hear you. You are.
Yes.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
So my name is David. I'm a PhD student from the life science. Today I present the step cell scandal. What was one of the most recent scandal in the biological field. But if why it's not passing the slide? Yeah.
You cannot flip the slides?
See?
Okay.
So the principal two persons of this scandal was Haruko Obakata and Yoshiki Sasai. Haruko Obakata was a very famous researcher in her field. Like she was, like the people talk about her as a lab director dream. She worked a lot. The people of the lab said then she mastered every methods and machine. She was called as a golden hands. She could, everything that she did at the lab was going with the right result. Another student said that never met someone smarter than her. And the people say then they will not find many people gift as Haruko there. And she was the first author for the both papers. And what I research in this history, I understand that her motivation was showed that the women also can be like a good researcher, because in the Japan, the male dominant was a male dominant environment in this field. And also I think her goal was win the Nobel Prize, like another Japanese, Shini Yamanaka, then work in her field of stem cells and also won the Nobel Prize. The second character was the professor okay. So the Yoshi Sasai, he was the lab director. He won a lot of prizes, and he was known as brain maker. He developed a technique. Then with stem cells, he could recreate brain tissue and also eye tissue. All the history happened in the Riken Japan Center, one of the largest scientist building in Japan. It's like a Wייס Institute here, if you compare here in Israel. It's really like have like a lot of research there, and all the research, it's like first impact, world-class research. And the two published article that was restract was the stimulus trigger phase conversion of somatic cells into pluripotency. Then it's the technique that she development, and the other is showing how the technique works. I found another paper for this, for our discussing. Then it's the paper, the whole of the Twitter and social media inside the peer review. So what Obokata said, she developed a technique, then she could use blood cells or spleen cells from mice. She could put it in 25 minutes in acid, cultivate for 7 days, and after she could take these cells and put in the mouse, and she could create an embryo, like she created a mouse. Then you have many tissues, different tissues. Then you'll be shining by GFP. And she wanted to compare this technique, then was better if you compare with the technique in IPS. The IPS was created for the Nobel Prize winner. It's the same field, it's the same idea. You can take a cell and you can reprogram the cell from stem cells, and after you can use these cells for treat tissue damage, like neuronal tissue damage, then you don't have cure today. So this guy really won the Nobel Prize, and it's like really merit, because it's like amazing work. And she tried to change this technique, make it easier, and was so fantastic the way that she found and her discovered, and the technique really went out very fast in the Twitter. You can see the article was published in January 29, and you can see in the Twitter how was the peak of the news, how the people start to speak a lot of her, and also go out from the newspapers, and all of this was fantastic, because now the people could like create tissue very fast in vitro with cells, and could do every organ in the body. But how she go up fast? We have a popular dictator in Brazil, then everything's then go fast, down fast, you know, for every word. But she go up very fast. The people start to try to do the same methods, and everyone fail. And they start to look for the article, and after the first boom of the paper, they started to say then probably have a misconduct. After some time, they found then the paper wasn't show the right results. So when she compared the STAP cells, then it's the cells that she development with the ES cells, then the cells that was reprogrammed, like recover for stem cell, they could see then in the STAP cells you can have placenta and you have like a real baby, mouse baby. No, but not this not happen when you use the other cell. But after some time, they discovered then was the same cell. They just took embryon cell and used for both, and they changed the image by Photoshop. After some times, then she couldn't show the same result. Nature sent a letter. Then we apologize for the mistake and for the misconduct of her. And they say then we couldn't trust in all the results from Obokata. After this, we can see here then Twitter also after some days start to say bad things about the paper. The peer review was so strong, and this didn't happen so fast with the newspapers. So because of this, like the people really start to investigate what happened because of the Twitter and how the news like run faster. And the people start to, I took some tweets from 2014 from the same date. Then the people start to say like bad things about her and about the paper. And the people was right. They found then the paper was retracted very fast. Like the paper was published in January, 29th of January, and in July was already retracted in the same year. And most of this was because how the news run fast in the Twitter. And after the paper like was retracted, the institute wrote that Obokata had really falsified and she really fabricated the data, and the STAP cells was only like embryonic cells that she just took. And Obokata had committed this mortal sin of science. So Haruko Obokata was found guilty by misconduct. Other article of her, they found also then she did misconduct. They go back in her history and they found in then her doctorate also was fake. They found 26 problems. No, this was in the paper, sorry. They found many problems in her doctoral thesis, like copyright and many things on her dissertation. And they also canceled her PhD. So she's not a doctor anymore. And I was like researching what happened with her. And the last year that she appeared in public was in 2018. She wrote that she was a person who has been hounded, and she was confident that what she saw in microscope was real, the STAP cells was real, and she one day the people will see that she was like right. Unfortunately, the Yoshi Sasai was also cleared of he was cleared of direct involvement. He was only criticized for supervision of Obokata and for not spotting inconsistency in publications. after the founding, the professor stayed 1 month in hospital by depression, and he was found in bed in his lab. He's committing suicide. One guard from the Hurricane Center found him with a rope in the neck in his lab. And unfortunately, Yoshi Sasai killed himself. But Obokata just went to meet him in the hospital. Before Yoshi Sasai died, he wrote 3 letters and put in his table. And one of the letters was directed for Obokata. In the letter, he say like, I hope that you prove for everyone that stop cells was real. And after he found that was really dramatic. I bring for us the timeline of the scandal. You can see that it was really fast, and most of this, I believe, was because of the Twitter, the preview in the Twitter. So you can see then that the article was like the abstract, like the resume of all the PowerPoint. It's like the article was publishing in 30th of January. In 12th of February, 12 days after, the people already start to suspicious about the results. In March, beginning of March, Professor Wakeyama already like called for retraction. The Rican asked for Obokata show that she was not lying. She couldn't. She was recognized of misconduct, and they retract the article was really fast and really a shame. So this was the history from Obokata. Thank you, everyone. And you can really trust the scientists. This is the question.
Thank you, David. That was great. So really reminds us of the Sean scandal, the direct people involved, but not doing the work, who are on papers, suffer the most, really. Batlog, the boss of Sean, was not doing good enough supervision, didn't catch all the misconduct, didn't hurt him too much. He was able to get a position in Germany, but still that stain stays for life. Sasai couldn't handle this. He was not responsible for the misconduct, but he was on the paper. And according to Japanese tradition, he committed suicide. This is really, really sad. So how do you make sure that something like that never happens to you? You have to trust your collaborators and your mentees. And this fine line is so difficult in our profession. So when you have driven people who are willing to cross lines and cheat, it's very, very hard. One needs to be very, very careful. So one of the purposes of this course is really to bring this to your awareness and don't commit suicide. That's not worth it. But he couldn't handle the shame. And he did not do anything wrong, except, I mean, sometimes you miss the mistakes or the errors, and you know, when you do peer review or whatever, you don't see it. Okay, so what was his responsibility in this? The young lady was very driven, and she was willing to cross the line. Thoughts, comments?
I was thinking this how when I doing this work, how far she could go for this, because if already the technique is wrong, the stop cells never exist. Like all the results was fake. Like everything. It's not that she only copy, I don't know, one graph, or she only create like everything from the paper. And if you take the paper to check, it's like millions of image and with supplementary material,
Yeah, and it's all Photoshop.
and it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's really
Well, but Sean, the same. He did not do any of those experiments. I mean, he had some graphs and then he put them in all kinds of papers. And yeah, it takes special personality. I would say it's some kind of a mental disease. It's not normal to go to that extent. Even if you're a scientist, driven scientist, and you really want to be successful and you're very competitive and so on. But to cross a line in this fashion, in my view, I'm not a professional psychiatrist or whatever, but some kind of a mental disease. And we always have in the population certain percentage of people with mental diseases, and some of the scientists have the same disease. It's incomprehensible to us. We are not trained as scientists to think that we can cheat and it's okay. But always we find people who do that. And you have to be very, very careful when you are in a collaboration and you assign on the paper to make sure that your colleagues are doing their part properly. More comments?
In my opinion, it also seems that the theory was so off, the method that she was trying, that I'm very surprised that it didn't, that her supervisor or in peer review, that they didn't notice it. I know that peer review is not perfect and they're not supposed to find plagiarism or fraud, but using acid to create stem cells.
To reprogram,
To program the cells, it's so weird. It's
outrageous.
so off.
David, can you unshare your screen so we can see each other? Yeah. So yeah, it's totally outrageous. Nowadays, and I think we shared that link with you, many journals have some kind of a AI filter that looks at figures, and it's like when you do plagiarism filters to make sure that, you know, even today when you I don't know if on Moodle you have that. Here at UCLA, every work submitted by students goes through some plagiarism filter, which is
we have that.
Yeah, so they have now the same for photos, for images. And so that's a big step forward. I think it's part of this is this misconduct. You can detect, you know, photos in articles that were manipulated by Photoshop. So that immediately raises a flag. So apparently this paper was published with huge manipulation of images by Photoshop and creating some kind of artificial data that supports the claims. So as we go along, the technical tools are getting better in trying to discover such cases. And I think for the people who really are very motivated to cheat, it's becoming more and more difficult, but they will find, you know, cracks if you are really motivated to cheat at some point, and even if the technology has all kinds of barriers, you'll find a way to overcome the technology. Yeah. I want you to come out of this course with saying, wow, we did not know that this is so prevalent. Sorry,
aquela galera da Xará vem pra cá e eu preciso arranjar casa pra eles. Por enquanto, não tô conseguindo muitas casas. Se eu conseguir.
What about that? Okay, so it's there, it's prevalent, and when we finish, everybody is presenting. You'll see so many cases. It's just unbelievable. More comments? All right, it's already 8:30 your time. I'll send you to bed. And I really hope that we can meet in person next week. Until then, have a great week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.